Good evening. My name is Sam Lewis. I am the Director of Communications and Engagement at Ragdale. And welcome to Ragdale Talks, our monthly conversation series. Ragdale is a nonprofit artists community located on the former country estate of architect Howard Van Doren Shaw. While we are below capacity at the moment due to the ongoing effects of COVID-19, we normally host 200 residencies and fellowships annually to creative professionals of all types, making Ragdale one of the largest interdisciplinary artist communities in the country. Ragdale residents represent a cross-section of ages, cultures, experiences, and mediums for a diverse and vibrant community. In each session, 13 artists in residence enjoy uninterrupted time for work, a supportive environment, dynamic artist exchanges, 50 acres of idyllic prairie, and a family-style dinner each evening. This evening, we host a talk with Ragdale alumnus Oliver Caplan, who is an award-winning American composer who writes melodies that nourish our souls, offering a voice of hope in an uncertain world. Inspired by the resiliency of the human spirit and the beauty of the natural world, his music celebrates stories of social justice, conservation, and community. Mr. Kaplan's works have been performed in over 175 performances nationwide. He will be joined by Soprano Kelley Hollis and cellist Minjin Chung, all from Juventas New Music Ensemble, where Mr. Kaplan is the artistic director, about their upcoming concert, One World, and music making in the COVID era. This conversation will be moderated by Ragdale alumnus and composer Scott Eyerly, who's been recognized for achievements in theater, opera, symphonic, choral, song, and chamber works. Please welcome our guest this evening.
Thank you so much, Sam. I'm delighted to welcome you. I'm Scott Eyerly. I will be your moderator or host tonight, which thrusts me into a Judge Judy-like role. However, I left the robes at the dry cleaner. Folks, if you have watched any previous Ragdale Talks, which I encourage you to do, you will have noticed that the host and guest have a profound, intimate relationship. For example, a novelist will thank her mentor or appreciate the blurb she has written for him or her. Well, just to shake things up, our guest tonight, Oliver Caplan, and I have never met. I have never spoken to Mr. Kaplan until, that is, 36 hours ago. I am delighted that he will be joining us. We do have a few things in common. Besides our dashing good looks, we are both composers, as Sam described. Of course, we have both had residencies at Ragdale, and I will be asking Oliver more about that as we go forward. Let me briefly mention, if you are new to this format, should you like to ask any questions or offer any comments, you can do so through the Zoom chat feature by hovering your mouse at the bottom center of your screen. Click on the chat icon, type away, hit enter, and we will be able to see that. So I'm going to begin tonight with a little segment focused on our composer guest, Oliver, and a little bit later we'll be bringing in our distinguished performing guests, Kelley and Minjin. Oliver, first of all, may I simply say to you, welcome and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And I'm going to start with two questions. The first one about beginnings and the second one about now. So here's my first question. How did music enter your life? Now, I ask this because, as a composer myself, when I tell people what I do, they often look at me like I'm from Saturn, and they wonder, how on earth did you end up doing something so weird? And yet, nobody asks accountants how did accounting enter your life? Nobody asks lawyers, how did law enter your life, as if there's something kind of inevitable or natural about it. So in your case, Oliver, I know that sometimes a musician will say, oh, I first heard music in a church choir that I sang in, or my brother played in a rock band, or my father was a professional banjoist. So can you just talk a little bit, please? How did music enter your life?
Yeah. First, I really love that you said that about composers and how people think it's so esoteric, because singing, of course, is maybe the most natural art form. And I think little kids everywhere just run around on the sidewalk, skipping and making up melodies and singing them. And the only difference between that and, I mean, it's really, composing is more natural than writing, and certainly than painting or making pottery. It's just that we don't teach people how to write down their melodies, or when we're young, we're not impressed upon that they might be something worth holding on to and saving. But for me, I took piano lessons from a young age, starting in kindergarten, and I played piano all the freaking time, but I was not a very good student. Means that I never wanted to practice the Bach and the Mozart, but I could not pass the piano without stopping and playing for hours, just improvising and making up my own things. And I guess in retrospect, it's clear I was a composer, but my piano teacher actually tried to fire me. And my mom said, it just seems such a shame because, well, he just seems to get a lot of pleasure out of it. And at least he plays the Bach at your house once a week. Why not keep him on? And I'm probably my teacher's only student to have gone on and become a professional musician, albeit a composer. I mean, I do not have piano fingers. But I guess that's how I started on that journey. And then in college, I really started learning how to write down my melodies. Although for undergrad, I thought I was going into a world to be an environmental scientist, but I kept taking music classes just for fun because I couldn't get enough of them. And fast forward, and here we are.
Well, that's wonderful. You've already mentioned something else we have in common, which is challenged piano playing. You mentioned your environmental studies interest, Oliver, and I noticed on your wonderful website, which I encourage everyone to check out, olivercaplan.com. Am I correct with the URL there? There's a marvelous picture of you waist deep in a lake composing music, which I hope was photoshopped. But can you talk just a little bit, since you brought up this environmental thread, how that impacts or is worked into your music?
The photo that you're referring to is not photoshopped.
Ah.
I was in Walden Pond in Concord, Massachusetts, of Thoreau fame, which is one of my favorite places. And I was wearing a bathing suit under the water, so I wasn't wearing like dress pants under the water. And a bunch of biology geeks who are friends of mine and also photographers went out in like waders, and we took those photos. So that was a fun adventure. But sure, actually the environmental side of my past has been a strong recurring theme in my music. There are a number of things that inspire my work, but certainly nature is probably the strongest and most recurring theme if you look at all my music over time. And I think it's just the place where I feel most happy and most inspired and at ease and most myself. So I've always just felt that connection, which is also one of the reasons I love Ragdale, because you can compose in the studio and then wander out into this seemingly unending prairie, and it really gets the creative juices flowing.
Oliver, my second question has to do with the present. Now, you have a world premiere in 3 days, and we're going to talk about the concert itself a little bit later in our talk. But at this moment, could we find out a little bit more about the piece? I think it's the Conciones De Monteverde. It has a very interesting backstory, which I would like you to tell, if you would, please.
Yeah, I was in Monteverde, Costa Rica in December 2019 into January 2020, so right before I was at Ragdale, and then COVID hit. And Monteverde is, it's Costa Rica, but if you haven't been, it's high in elevation. So it's like high elevation cloud forest, and it's one of the most biodiverse places on the planet. And I got to go birding with a local naturalist, and over 6 hours, we started at like 5 in the morning, we saw over 50 species of birds, which is pretty much mind-blowing. I don't think I could have named 50 species of birds before this adventure, and I was just incredibly inspired by that experience. And when I was at Ragdale, I actually started writing this piece, and I took melodies from some of the birds we had seen. I looked up the bird calls, and I tried to like transcribe them musically and with some liberties, and then sort of use those as musical motive materials to build the fabric of this piece. That piece, I didn't know, of course, that would be my last international trip and last trip of really any type for quite some time. So it's become a lot more important to me with each passing month, because that memory was means so much and something I'm holding on to and looking forward to being back out in the world again. And it was actually, COVID is the opposite of instant gratification. As an artist, I normally am writing pieces usually pretty close to the premiere and right up against the deadline. I have a whole bunch of works that I've been sitting on because the premieres have been canceled, and this quartet was supposed to be premiered in Michigan last spring. They're going to perform it, I think, this coming fall now. But so there is this, like, it's sort of, I don't know, Scott, if you've had this experience as well, but there is something about having all these. I wrote some big choral works while I was at Ragdale too, and obviously choruses haven't been able to get together, so it's one has to be very patient right now and sit and wait for their sort of babies to see the light of day.
Absolutely, well understood. Now, this world premiere will take place on a concert performed by the Juventas New Music Ensemble, of which you are the artistic director, described on its website as, quote, the only professional ensemble of its kind devoted to the music of emerging composers. I see that it was founded in 2005. Please correct me if I am providing disinformation, and that your ensemble has presented works by more than 200 living composers, a reminder to listeners that the phrase living composer is not an oxymoron. Do you want to talk a little bit, Oliver, about how Juventus came to be? Was it originally your idea? Are you the sole or co-founder? How did that all happen?
Juventus was founded in 2005 by composer Aaron Welskamp, who I know we went to grad school together at the Boston Conservatory. I'm actually the fourth artistic director. My predecessor, Lydia Yankovskaya, is actually now music director of Chicago Opera Theater, so she's in Ragdale's neighborhood these days. And Juventus is kind of like a niche within a niche within a niche. I mean, classical music already being in the larger music world today, a smaller thing, and then contemporary classical being a focus on living composers, which, as Scott said, is not an oxymoron. And Erin and she co-founded it with Julia Scott Carey, who was our founding pianist and still today, and then conductor Mark David Buckles. And they saw a real need. So if you're an emerging, let's say, emerging painter, or an emerging poet, at whatever stage you are in your development, you can put your work out there in full for the world to experience at the place you are at that time. And as a composer, we need other people to perform our pieces in order for an audience to be able to experience them. And of course, the quality of the performers makes a big difference, whether it's student performers or top-notch professionals, and they saw that there was this real challenge for emerging voices to get from kind of a being right out of grad school, say, to becoming a more later career, established professional composer. And they had this vision for an ensemble that would give top-notch performances to exciting rising voices, and really both help lift up those composers' careers and also introduce our audiences to new voices that are living today and responding to events that are going on in the world.
When the COVID pandemic hit, you were in the midst of a season I understand that you resourcefully moved to, at first, a stay-at-home program. Maybe we could refer to that as phase one or stage one. And I would like you to please talk about that, and then I'm going to bring in Kelley and Minjin in a moment to talk further. Can you just explain what were those first weeks like? What was your initial reaction to the challenges of COVID?
I remember, I think so, March 6th, I went to a concert with the Chamber Orchestra of Boston, which is the last non-Juventus performance I've been to in a year and a half. And they had a reception after their concert, as we do as well. And this was still in the like elbow bumping phase. And they had repurposed their reception with like, they had individually packaged Pepperidge Farm cookies because we were all thinking you shouldn't touch things or whatever. So I just remember going to the reception and taking notes in my head because I was like, oh, these are good ideas we could use for our own COVID safe reception, not having any idea that in 2 weeks we would cancel our April concert. And we did actually, we were one of the first groups in Boston to pull a concert before it was required by the state. I think both we saw the writing on the wall, but also as we learned more and more about COVID, we wanted to be good role models out there and encouraging people to stay home and not spread the virus. And but that was heartbreaking. I mean, there's so much work that goes into planning a conference, and the decision to cancel. I mean, at the time, I think we thought it was only one concert we were losing, but we did have this, we had a meeting with all the musicians and talked about this idea to launch a series called Stay Home with Juventus, which we launched 5 days from that meeting. And so over the course of 3 months, every Wednesday night, one of our musicians during the stay home period performed a half an hour solo concert from their home. We didn't have fancy cameras or ring lights or anything then. People were doing it with their iPhone or their iPad or whatever they had on hand. And Ryan, our violinist who did the kickoff concert, like bravely volunteered to do it 5 days after we had agreed that we were going to launch this series. Wow. And then from there it all flowed, yes. But that really, I'll leave like Kelley and Minjin maybe to talk more about the performance experience of it, but we had audience members who you'd see, that was on Facebook, and we had audience members you see in the chat room every week. And I know, you start to pick up a little story that just happens that there's someone I know who's a hospital chaplain in Somerville, Massachusetts, and she was basically going to work every day and helping people die alone, which is heartbreaking. And she would come to each of these concerts and, I did happen to know her story, but you're like, well, if we could make things a little bit better just for her alone, you would think that this whole thing is worth it. And then knowing that there's so many stories that we don't know for all the other people there, it felt very meaningful.
Oh, definitely. No, it sounds wonderful. I'd like at this moment now to bring in Kelley, because in a moment we're going to be watching a short video clip of her singing. Kelley is a soprano with Juventus, and I'm going to ask you, first of all, Kelley, is how did you get involved with this ensemble? Did, for example, Oliver threaten your family? How did this all come about?
Sure. I believe my first connection, other than just seeing some of the shows that Juventus was doing at the time, was through Lydia Yankovskaya, who Oliver mentioned. I was working on an opera with her, and she mentioned a composer who she's like, Juventus is recording his piece, and I gave him some singers, and he chose you, and will you record this with us? And so my first Juventus gig was actually a recording gig of Oliver's piece, Connect All, We All Connect. And yeah, we recorded that at Futura Studios, which is now coincidentally where we've been streaming all of our concerts since other than the stay home things for COVID. So yeah.
Wonderful. Now, In just a moment, I will ask Oliver to pull up the clip of you singing. This was, I believe, week 7 of the Stay Home with Juventus. And Kelley, can you just give us a brief description? You do talk a little bit about it on the video itself, but can you talk a little bit about what the text is and so on?
Sure. Which video is it actually, Oliver? I'm sorry, I don't know.
I'm sorry, I didn't know if you...
Which?
It's the one from JP. You start with, I'm blanking on the title. Is it Eve's Lament?
Oh, Eve's Lament, sure. Yeah, my teacher, in collecting, I knew I wanted to do an unaccompanied performance. At that point, I wasn't ready to take up singing with accompaniment tracks. Now it's like all I do. I have a whole library of them. But at the time, I just did not want to face that. And so I searched for pieces for unaccompanied voice, unaccompanied soprano, and my teacher mentioned this one and as part of a cycle. And I just thought it was a pretty way to kick off the evening.
Wonderful. May I ask you then, Oliver, to please pull up this clip? It's about 2 minutes, and I think this will be a real treat for everybody.
I would just say I want to, because hopefully Kelley doesn't hate me for playing this clip, but this was the very early days of COVID when we were really learning how to do things. And what I love about this is like just how real Kelley is, and you feel it, and it's authentic. And I think that really translated to the audience.
All right. Hello, my name is Kelley Hollis. Welcome to week 7 of Stay Home with Juventus. You are joining me live from Jamaica Plain. Welcome. Whether this is your first week joining us or your 7th week joining us, thank you so much for being a part of this series, this unconventional series in this unconventional time. It's wild. But we're really happy to have you here, and we're happy to be able to keep a connection with our audience, which is why we decided to do this. So thank you for joining me. Hi, Minjin. I can see people. Okay. So you can access the program and all the texts for this on the Juventus website. I also uploaded, hi Abby, I uploaded it right here into the description, so you should be all set. This program is 100% unaccompanied voice, which is really not quite common. Singers tend to sing with other people. We don't like to be alone. I don't like being alone. I don't like being away from you. But I also don't like singing along to like pre-recorded tracks, so this is what we're doing. We've got 3 pieces tonight that are all for solo voice, recommended by different people. This first piece was recommended by my teacher, hi Lynn, who's watching, Lynn Eustace. It really helped me kind of set the tone for what I wanted to do here, and so thank you, Lynn, and this is Eve's Lament by Gilda Lyons. but for me.
Brava. Very beautifully done. And Kelly, I know how difficult that is to sing without accompaniment. You have lovely intonation and support. Beautifully done there. And Oliver, I do understand what you mean about the fact that, of course, by virtue of circumstance, everyone was learning what to do. This was all seat of the pants. I think that was amazingly impressive 7 weeks into the pandemic to be able to put that on. Oliver, could you talk now, please, about phase 2? Because I know there has been a decided upgrade in the technical transmission of the Juventus performances. How did that all come about, and how does that work?
We really wanted to bring everybody back together in the same room safely. It's not the same when you're singing alone, and there's a chemistry, and a lot of groups took the approach with this like a cappella app where you each record your own part and put that together, which is one approach, and that's great. But we really wanted to be together and to make music live and put it out there. Kelly says it's a coincidence that we were in Future, but in a way it wasn't, because I've done a lot of recording projects at Future, which is a recording studio in the Rosendale neighborhood of Boston before. And honestly, the first thing is I just thought we would bring our own camera and do some kind of live stream, but no place would let us in. And we were also looking for something, where maybe we could have nicer mics or something. So I just called up John Weston, the owner of Future, to be like, would you ever let us in? Could we maybe do the same? Maybe we could do the mics and we could bring a low-tech camera or something. And it turned out that I called at the right moment, because John had, of course, lost 60 sessions in the early days of the pandemic, but he made a kind of gutsy leap of his own, and he saw that there might be this need to live stream concerts in a way that could give an audience the immediate experience of you're really there. And he invested in a lot of fancy camera equipment that he didn't previously own, and he agreed to let us be his guinea pigs. So in June, literally we did this, it was a week or two after Boston lifted its stay-home requirements. We did a re-envision season finale concert at Future, and we learned a lot from that first concert, which was really helpful, and that enabled us over the summer. We made the decision to plan an all-virtual concert series and to double down on that and announce the way we would normally announce an entire season. We were actually the first ensemble in Boston to announce an all-virtual series, and that's how we were approaching this year. And having had the early experience with John, we were able to plan the programs in a way and really re-envision the whole concert night. We still do pre-concert talks just on Zoom. We have a program book, it's online, and think about that. But anyway, it's high definition video from 4 cameras. It's CD quality audio. We broadcast on YouTube, and the concerts are free and open to everybody.
In a moment, we will have a chance to sample a clip from this very magnificently produced program. I'd like now to bring in the cellist, Minjin Chung. And Minjin, you are one of the musicians featured in this excerpt from a piece by Oliver, a piece titled Watershed. And Oliver, in a moment, I will ask you a little bit about the piece. But Minjin, I guess I have a slightly different question for you. I see from your bio that you have had extensive experience playing in symphony orchestras like New World in Miami and the Aspen Music Festival Orchestra. Now, one of your gigs, of course, is playing with Juventus, a chamber-sized ensemble, and obviously focusing on contemporary music. How is that different, or is it different for you than playing Dvorak's Eighth with 72 other players? Could you talk about that experience, please?
Sure. It's very different, I think, in my experience. I mean, playing in an orchestra, I love it. Lots of really great repertoire written for the orchestra. Some of my favorite pieces are orchestral pieces. I think being in a new music ensemble, especially a smaller sized one, really keeps me like on my toes and makes me really be vigilant about being prepared for every rehearsal and every concert. I mean, not that you shouldn't do that for orchestra either, but I mean, it's really like the responsibility is on your shoulders because you're the only instrument. There's only like one instrument per part, so you really have to carry through. Also, playing specifically new music has been a very kind of welcome change of pace as well, because I feel like it forces me to be more creative in a way, because I can't just get lazy and listen to a recording of someone else playing it and being like, oh, I like what they did, so I'm just going to do it like that, because it's tempting, right? Sometimes you just listen to it and like, oh, I like the way they did that, so I'll pick and choose from recordings or whatever. But with this new stuff, a lot of the time with Juventus, we've been doing world premieres of pieces. So you really have to get into the score and not only know your part, but really know how it fits together with the rest of the ensemble members. So it's really, I think, improved my musicianship overall.
Excellent. Very interesting. I like your point about not being able to rely on or be influenced by predecessors because you don't have a lot of recordings of, Starker playing Oliver's music, for example. Thank you, Minjin. Let's go back here to Oliver then. We're going to hear an excerpt from your composition titled Watershed. I see that it is for a somewhat unusual group of instruments. We have piano, flute, clarinet, horn, and cello. That part, of course, you will see and hear in a moment, played by Minjin. Could you, Oliver, talk a little bit about your choice of instrumentation and the title, Watershed?
That's funny that you asked that, because we do, as an ensemble, we often do call for scores to invite composers from around the country and around the world to submit their works. And we're typically shorter on works that deploy our wonderful flute, clarinet, and horns. So as long as I'm writing a piece, I'm like, oh, we'll pick up Nick and Wilcott and Ann, and that'll make sure that they have something to play. Whereas like everything, typically cello and piano tend to be in almost everything we receive. So Minjin obviously has a pretty hefty workload. So I guess that's the short answer, but the instruments go gorgeously together, and the sort of treat of getting to write for Juventus is that I'm writing for my friends and for musicians who I know really well. So it's not like I'm writing for generic cello, I'm writing for Minjin, and that feels really nice.
Excellent. And would you talk a little bit about the title and the conception of the piece, and maybe set up a little bit where this next excerpt comes from within the piece?
Yeah, so the title of the piece is Watershed, and it's another, speaking of nature-inspired works. This is inspired by one of my favorite walks, which was literally leaving my house in Medford Square outside of Boston. And a few blocks is this river, the Mystic River, and you can kind of meander your way along the river for miles up into Arlington and Winchester, and you get to this series of gleaming lakes. And it's always been a favorite walk, but there became a period, of course, this past year where it was amongst my three choices of things that I could do were go on this walk. And I don't think I could have, it's funny to say, I don't think I could have gotten through, the first few months of COVID if that river wasn't there. It was just this, place that really brought me back down a notch and helped me center. So it felt fitting it was the first piece I wrote during COVID and to write about the river. And this, the excerpt in the play is from the second movement. There's three movements. They're called Turn, Come, Flow, which I think I envisioned rather than like different places along the river. I envisioned it about a little bit more like different moods and sort of that process of first arriving at the river and the mental change that occurs during a walk.
Well, we look forward to viewing and hearing it now. Just before you run it, would you, Oliver, tell us the names of the other musicians who are performing, which I do not have?
Yes, Nicholas Southwick on flute, Wolcott Humphrey on clarinet, and Ian Howarth on horn, and then Minjin on cello, and Julia Scott Carries on piano. Although I think you do hear everybody, but I'm starting the section with a cello solo. So yeah, here we go.
Very lovely. No, I know it's terrible to have Kaplan's own music in the middle of a fermata. I know I saw you biting the block of wood to make yourself able to do it. And Minjin, beautiful playing, and also to the other musicians. And as you mentioned, Oliver, very handsome digital high definition quality of the audio and video, very impressive. Which brings us to our next subject, and that is this concert that is coming up on Saturday night. While I'm asking these questions here, if we can possibly paste into the chat column information, I will very briefly say that I see from your PR materials, your concert is titled One World. It includes composers from France, Peru, Azerbaijan, and other countries. Could you talk a little bit, Oliver, about what this concert is, why this program is important, and any other details you'd like to give us?
Sorry, I'm muting myself. The first thing I think I want to say is that we're talking about the concert because we want you all to come. It's free and it's open to everyone. And one of the super cool things about streaming these concerts live is you don't have to be in Boston to join us. Since we started the Stay Home series last March, over 30,000 people have watched our virtual concerts, which is crazy. I mean, normally we have like 125 people in our concert hall. So yeah, we'll preview it a little bit, but come look at that link and join us on Saturday. The inspiration for the concert, I think, too, if ever there were a time to think about the global community, I think it's now. Certainly, COVID and with global warming and just, I mean, even violence in the Middle East today, but there's so many challenges that we face, you know, as a world, and it's scary, but the world is also really beautiful, and there's so many cultures. So, you know, I think the concert is one part just, you know, heartful connection around the world. And then we were also thinking in a time when we all haven't been able to travel very much that we could have a little fun taking our audience on a musical tour of the world with us. So we do have composers from all 6 inhabited concerts, which is pretty, continents. We have South Africa, Australia, Hong Kong, France, Azerbaijan, Peru, and 2 of us from the US, and also 3 of those composers have written works inspired by other countries, so there's also this sort of cultural mingling going on. That's cool.
Now, it sounds like an incredible program. We have an audio clip from this program, not because we possess Star Trek-like abilities to grab material from the future, but because we have a recording of Kelley performing one of the pieces from, am I correct, Oliver, an April 2018 concert. This is the Martin Loridin piece, the Croquis.
Yes. So, and Minjin is, it's actually both Kelley and Minjin are on this recording.
Oh, excellent.
It's a piece for soprano and string quartet. And one of the things that we started doing is having these, we call them play it again surveys, but when people come to our concerts, they can fill out the survey and say, each piece on the program, how much would you like to hear it again? Because we're not playing Beethoven, and we want to get a sense, and we want to give people a sense of ownership over their concert experience. So this was an audience favorite in 2018. And also, maybe before I play it, I don't know if Minjin or Kelley, if you want to say anything about this piece, because it was also a big musician favorite.
I would be very interested to hear from either of you. Do you have any, or actually maybe, here as an opera composer myself, I'm going to favor for a moment the soprano. Kelley, do you want to talk at all about the text? I believe it is Paul Verlaine. Am I correct?
Yeah, so Paul Verlaine, the translation of the title is Parisian Sketch, and it really is kind of, when you hear it, it's almost like a moment frozen in time. It uses really sensory, descriptive, and also just kind of out of left field language. And then with that kind of text, it paints with the music, like kind of to echo what the text is saying. It's very, it's sensory, I guess. And it's very beautiful to sing, which I think is probably why we're doing it again.
And Minjin, may I ask you, when I listen to this music, perhaps this is stereotypical, but it sounded to me very French. I know the composer is French. It seemed to me that it had this heritage of the Debussy and Ravel. Did you feel that or draw on that at all in your playing, or did you not feel that?
Oh, absolutely. It's very French. Maybe I'm also being stereotypical, but yeah, very much so. Yeah, it really did remind me a lot of the Ravel or Debussy string quartets. And we definitely talked a lot in rehearsal about trying to find that kind of a sound when we, as a string quartet, kind of blending to create that kind of light, really lush, but also not heavy, but this really airy, beautiful French sound.
Well, you definitely achieved that. Let's listen now. Oliver, I'll kick this back to you. If you could please run this audio clip from the Croquis Parisien by Martin Loridin. Very beautiful. And indeed, I think we hear that very gossamer type of light, evocative sound in the singing as well. I know that's very difficult to pull off. And I think also for everyone tuning in now, this gives you a little sense of the amazing variety that is available on these Juventus concerts, that is offered by these Juventus concerts. Another reason to tune in on Saturday night. Let me keep Kelley and Minjin with us just for a moment. I would be interested, and please jump in, whichever of you wishes, talk a little bit about what are the differences between your, quote, normal, end quote, performing lives, where you're on stage all the time, and this strange new world of performing without an audience, other than the fact that you don't hear audience members slowly unwrapping plastic covered candy. That must be one advantage of COVID. But what is it, how do you prepare differently? Do you perform differently? Please jump in, either Kelley or Minjin. How is that different for you?
I guess I'll jump in. In terms of preparing, I don't think that there's anything, besides kind of having to find spaces to rehearse, the logistics, but yeah. But in terms of like actually the music itself, I think we prepare as if we're playing live, because we are, but just virtually. It certainly is strange to pour your heart out into the music and then you finish and it's just silence. So that's something that we've been getting used to. But I've kind of embraced, I've decided, I'm going to find the silver lining here. And I've really doubled down on educating myself on recording, like investing in recording equipment. I had to ask my friends who have more experience than me in that regard. What kind of mic should I buy? What are the different types of mics? I had no idea. I had no idea what a DAW was. I had no idea, any of these things. So I've been really educating myself and finding ways to play around with recording with other colleagues of mine and putting them together on the computer and finding creative ways to exist virtually. And I've made the choice to embrace it. But at the same time, I am really looking forward to meeting everyone in person again.
Oh, I think both are possible. I think we are in a position where we maybe don't want to make the choice, but we must and can still yearn for the contact. Kelley, how is it different for you?
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, I think I have embraced it as well. it's weird because the nerves are kind of the same. You would think like, oh, without the live audience, like those wouldn't be there. But it was so strange having just like the same, doing my at-home concert, having that same whole, just cycle of emotions that you have on concert day, but just having them all in my bedroom. That was strange, but it was kind of transformative because after that you're like, okay, wow, I can do that. I can do this impossible thing that I didn't think I could do. And then that kind of has driven me. All of us have learned to do new things, and even Oliver, like he wrote lyrics for a song because he just didn't have anyone else at the time who could write them, but we needed this song, and like so it's been empowering in that sense, I would say.
Wonderful. Let me finish our talk by going back to Oliver. I have a couple of final questions. Let me ask you one thing regarding your work with Juventus. Why, for you, was it important, and is it obviously still important, to soldier on with performances during the pandemic? Why did you not just as easily throw up your hands and say, look, this pandemic is tough. We're going to take a breather. We'll see you folks again in 15 months. Why did you make the decision, no, I don't care how we do it, whether it's at home or in the studio, we are going to continue? Why does that matter?
I guess I have a three-pronged answer to that. I think first is arts organizations or service organizations. And I mean, as much as it's fun to be in the spotlight, we exist to touch people's hearts and make their day a little better, or make them think or reflect about what's going on in the world. And I think in a challenging time like this, people need music more. And to some extent, I feel like if we're not performing now, why are we ever performing? This is when people need music to help get through this period. So I think that's prong one. Prong two is, I think, is sort of the want to take care of our own and our musicians. Mitchell could speak better to this, but our musicians lost a lot of work. I mean, especially initially in the pandemic, but still most of them are not. I mean, most of our musicians perform multiple nights a week, and now in terms of like live public performance, some of them it's once a month, if that. And so that we could do our part and provide the same amount of performance opportunities and compensation that our crew would normally get in a normal year. We can't fix the whole city, but we can do that. And then I think third is also the survival of the organization. I think COVID is an innovate or die moment. And I'm not convinced that we could have taken 15 months off and survived. No funder is going to give you beyond that initial crash. Nobody's going to fund you to not be making art. And we believe in the mission of what we're doing and the importance of, new classical music and voices of today. And I'm not sure that if we hadn't been performing that we would be in any place to reboot at this point. And the one of the wonderful silver linings of all of this is actually that like our audience and the support for our organization is bigger than ever, which is for us, it feels so, now it's easy to be like, oh, hey, 30,000 people are watching, but like the things we did were scary. Even deciding to make the virtual concerts free was scary because normally we have ticket revenue, and we were just hoping that, people who are regulars might donate like they'd buy a ticket and that it would all work out, and it has and more. So that's the other thing is the being able to exist to see tomorrow as an organization. And I think we all want Juventus to exist. I want Juventus to exist beyond me as artistic director and beyond any of the musicians who are in the ensemble today. I think we owe that to the future.
Well, that's an incredible accomplishment. And again, bravo to you all. We have a question from Amy Sinclair. Hi, Amy, at Ragdale. And she asks, what are lessons you will take into your work post-pandemic? Maybe you've learned nothing.
I have an answer, but I didn't know if Kelley or Minjin, if you want to say anything.
I don't know if Kelley or Minjin want to chime in on that one.
I can tell you that we're working on plans for next season, although we have a summer series too with some outdoor concerts in the Boston area and one more virtual concert. But we are looking at continuing to stream even as we go back into the concert hall. And I think we have both learned how to stream, period, and how to do it in a high quality way. And although there was an extra need for this now, I think I've become more aware. There's there's people who can't come to the concerts because they're not physically able, they're in a hospital or in a nursing home, or because they have kids and they can't afford a babysitter, or they can't get one to the poor kids. Or, so many people in so many circumstances who aren't able to get to the concert hall, or maybe they'd like to be part of our community, but they're not in Boston. So I think we're going to have some think tanks this summer with musicians, board, and staff to talk about basically. I don't see us as reverting to the way things were. We're going to talk about what have we learned this year and what should concert making look like post-COVID.
Excellent, excellent. We have another question, which will have to go to you directly, Oliver, which is, why are residencies important to your work, and what, if anything, do you take away from a residency, such as a residency at Ragdale, to implement into your day-to-day life?
Life in 2021 is the chaotic and is the constant texts and phone calls and cell phones and bills and mail and all the things. And so the opportunity to hide away for a little bit in a gorgeous, inspirational place and focus on creating is invaluable. I mean, basically, this is not an exaggeration. For me, one week at Ragdale is worth 1 month of writing at home. So 3 or 4 weeks at Ragdale is worth 3 or 4 months of writing. And, I think balance works in different ways, and we all want to have day-to-day balance. But an opportunity like Ragdale in the broader arc of a year or a couple of years gives you the opportunity to take some devoted time to focus on creating. And the other thing is that being with other artists. Kelly's going to laugh at me because I wrote this COVID song she referred to called Alone Together, which was about the stay-home period. But I also think that there's a different way in which the residency is a bit of alone together. First of all, I meet all these other interesting artists who are doing amazing work, and that inspires me, and it makes me want to be my best artist self in the conversations that happen over group meals. But also this kind of being in my studio at 11 o'clock at night and then seeing other people's lights on and knowing that they're working too. There's something really nice about that solidarity and being in a place where people have just decided to prioritize right now. I'm going to focus on the art.
Excellent. I'll finish here. Speaking of solidarity, I'm delighted to promote your new album with a July release titled Watershed, right after the same piece that we excerpted. And if you would like to speak about that, please do, but at the same time, in the same breath, I don't want to let you slip away without exciting news about a new piece with text by a rather well-known author. So I wonder if you want to maybe just say a few words about both of those important events.
Yeah, I'll touch on the album. I will not deny being inspired by Taylor Swift, but there is a drive. I mean, I think everything that we're doing is, with Juventas too, is trying to turn a sucky year into something good. And so I decided that this was going to be a home a lot this year and miss hanging out with my friends. It was a great time to make an album. So this album, Watershed, it's 3 pieces, each inspired by a beloved walk. Watershed is the new piece I wrote in 2021, and then there's 2 other pieces from 2018 and 19. Actually, one of them in the Direction of Dreams I wrote my first Ragdale residency in 2018. And it's all instrumental music. Kelly's not on the album, but Minjin is, and she sounds gorgeous, and it's coming out in July. And I realize this is not a Boston crowd, but we are having an outdoor album release concert celebration, which will be fun. But you'll be able to get it online and listen on all the streaming places. And then another project that I was working on this year, the estate of Maya Angelou granted me the rights to set her poem When Great Trees Fall. Actually, somebody had posted it on Facebook the day after Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, and that was, I just saw it and it really hit me, not actually for the RBG, but for the, just thinking about COVID and all the many great trees that we've lost this year. And I had to sign my life away to my Angelou's estate because it's a great process, but I'm just incredibly grateful to have that opportunity. And the piece was commissioned by the New Hampshire Master Chorale, and they are premiering it outdoors in Plymouth, New Hampshire, June 18 and 19. So that's going to be really nice to hear it. It's funny because I'm having singers text me because they've been rehearsing it and I haven't heard the piece yet.
That's ironic, isn't it? Often we as composers are the last people to hear our own music before the premiere. We've all had that experience where we'll get texts like, Scott, did you really want this in measure 74? We haven't heard the bloody thing yet. They don't let us come in. So I sympathize with you there. Folks, we have come to the end of our hour. Oliver, thank you so much for being a spectacular guest. Likewise to you, Kelley and Minjin. It's been a pleasure. I'm Scott Eyerly, and it was a great honor to be in this chair for an hour. I will hand the proceedings back to our fearless leader. I believe Sam is signing us out, or everything is just going to go black. There he goes.
Hello. Don't go away, anyone. Don't go away, anyone, just yet. Thank you so much, Oliver, Minjin, Kelley, and Scott. Scott, you have a job now. You're so good. You're so good at this. I was going to wait. I can't wait till after the backstage. I have to tell in front of everyone. You're so good.
I was thinking the same thing. You have you have a knack for moderating.
So prepared.